At the end of World War II then, Europe found itself in a remarkably different position than at the beginning of the century. At the beginning of the century, Europe was at the pinnacle of civilization. There was an incredible amount of optimism about the success of technology, about the mobilization of the masses, about the power of nationalism to unite against a common enemy and lift people up. Just 50 short years later then, there were 2 world wars. Those wars had a material destruction, destroying roads, destroying bridges, destroying houses and churches, wrecking banking systems with incredible amounts of debt. But this also brought about spiritual destruction, a loss of confidence in the ability to solve problems. There was a growing cynicism in Europe that no institutions could work. Churches couldn't work, governments couldn't work, everybody was a failure, and especially old people were a failure. So there was a resignation to the new reality. Europe found itself prostrate between 2 superpowers. Instead of a multi-power system with 5 great powers, the British, the French, the Russians, the Austrians, the Germans, no, this was a bipolar world. There were 2 great powers, one in Moscow and one in Washington. There was an Eastern Bloc and a Soviet bloc. There was the West. The Eastern Soviet bloc was dominated by the Soviet Union. It had a communist system. Single-party state, a mystical leader, a command economy, no freedom of speech, no freedom of the press, public ownership of property. On the other hand, there was the West. Multi-party elections, free market economies, a growing safety net. 2 different visions of how to reorganize society from complete destruction. The Soviets led one model in the East, the Americans and its allies led another model in the West. The big question, though, is was there going to be a future at all? If either one of these giants, either the eagle or the bear, got too antagonistic, and if that antagonism overflowed, it could result in mutually assured destruction. So the Cold War was an antagonistic relationship between the Soviet Union and the United States. Europe was prostrate between these 2 superpowers. If there was going to be another world war, it would be fought in Europe with nuclear weapons. Europe, for sure, would be destroyed, and if it couldn't be contained in Europe, the entire planet would be vaporized. This created an incentive for people to seek peaceful solution and compromises because the alternative was mutually assured destruction. This produced a Cold War. In that Cold War, there were multiple proxy conflicts. The Berlin blockade, the fight over Hungary, the fight over Czechoslovakia, Angola, Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras. Both the Soviets and the Americans flooded the world with arms to try to gain domination in any particular region. Only rarely did it threaten the entire world. That happened in Cuba in 1963 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. These conflicts, while deadly to the people that were involved, didn't ignite a third world war. There was always a fear of a third world war. There was always a fear that this would get out of hand and it would snowball. But at each step of the way, American and Soviet leaders pulled back from the brink to avoid mutually assured destruction.